We continue now at the top of Daf Lamed Chesam Beis Meseches Zevachim. This is Zevachim Daf 38b. On the previous summit, the Gemara said that we don't ever find that the blood of the karbonos is applied chetzio lamala v'chetzio lamata, some of it on the upper half of the mizbeach and some of it on the lower half of the mizbeach. We don't find that. You always find that it's applied on the same place. And the Gemara asks from the Mishnah in Yuma, the Mishnah talks about Hiza al taharo shal mizbeach, that he would sprinkle on the taharo shal mizbeach. And the Gemara now says, my lav, is it not a palge de mizbeach? It means the midpoint of the Mizbeach, some above and some below. Kedamri inshi tahar tiara diyuma, like people say, they talk about the midday. Rashi explains, my lava palge de mizbeach doesn't mean at the midpoint of the mizbeach, keneged chatzi govo, meaning halfway up its height. V'yev shalitzamtzem, it's impossible to be exact. Shalo yehe miksasam lamalu, miksasam lamata. Some of the blood is obviously going to be applied above, and some below. And tiara sarayim, again, we're talking about noon, we're talking about midday, and so isn't that what that Mishnah means? And so we do find that some of the blood is above and some is below. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rava Bar Shila. Rava Bar Shila says, lo, no, that's not the meaning of the Mishnah. Rather, the Mishnah is agiluye. What it means is the exposed part of the Mizbeach. It means the roof of the Mizbeach. Rashi explains, agiluye de Mizbeach al gago shal Mizbeach. It means on the roof of the Mizbeach. Shahi metaro tchila mideshen sha'olav. He would clear the space, umegales gago, to make it an open area, make the roof open. Ve'al shemetaro miyafeyu korile taharo kedechsiv v'tiaro. The idea is that he made it look nice. He cleared the area. That's why it says taharo shal Mizbeach. And the Gemara continues, Dechsiv, as it's written in the Pasuk as well, Uche'etzem hashamayim lo toar, it means like the clear day, and the idea is again that he would clear the area of the Mizbeach. But the Gemara continues and asks, Va'ika shirayim, but what about the remnant of the blood? You have karbonos where you apply the blood on the upper half of the Mizbeach, and then you pour the remnant at the base of the Mizbeach. That seems to be a split between the upper and the lower half. And the Gemara says to that, shirayim lo ma'akvi, that the remainder, the leftover blood, that's not something that's required to pour that at the base of Mizbeach. But the Gemara continues, Va'ika shirayim hapnimim, but what about the shirayim, the leftovers by that which is applied by the inner Mizbeach? And over there they would pour the shirayim at the base of the outer Mizbeach. So on the inner Mizbeach, it was the upper part of the Mizbeach, and then on the outer Mizbeach, it would be the lower. So it is some of it above, some of it below. And the Gemara continues and says, the Ika de Mandamar mi'akvi, because there are some that say that, again, that is required, the Shirayim hapnimim, so that is required, and you find some upper, some lower. And the Gemara says to that, Bechad mokom k'amrin, when we say we don't find that the blood is applied upper and lower Mizbeach, that's in one place, in one Mizbeach. But on two separate Mizbeachs, it is indeed possible. And Rashi explains, Va'ika shirayim shenishbachim liyasod ve'ikar hamatanos lamala. Again, the main applications of the blood, they're above on the upper part of the Mizbeach, but then the blood is poured to the yasod hamizbeach. The Gemara answered to that, shirayim lo ma'akvi, the remainder of the blood pouring into the yasod is not ma'akev kapar, it's not required for the kapar of va'anon b'domim hama'akvim ka'amrin. And we're talking about the blood that is required, to lo matzino chetzion lamala v'chetzion lamata. We don't find that half of it is above and half of it is below. The ikol mandamar ma'akvi, then the Gemara said, some say the shirayim hapnimim is ma'akev l'kamon be'ezel mekomon. This is later on in ezel mekomon. V'ikar hamatanos bekarnos hapnimi. Now the main applications is by the corners of the inner mizbeach, and the corners dahainu lamala, that is on the upper part of the mizbeach. V'hashirayim b'yasod mizbeach achitzon, and then the remainder is poured to the base of the outer mizbeach, dahainu lamata, which is below. And again, the Gemara answered, b'chad mokom b'mizbeach echad. We're talking about by one mizbeach. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Tanya, we learned in a Brayso, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Beis Shammai Omrim, that Beis Shammai say Shtei matanos shebechatos, the two applications of blood by the carbon chatos. Again, Beis Shammai hold that it's two applications that are absolutely required. V'yachas shebechol hazvachim, and then the one application of blood by other carbonos, which is absolutely required. So those applications, matiros umefaglos, they permit, meaning to say you do those applications that then permits the carbon, that's the matir of the carbon, let's say in terms of the basar to be eaten, etc. And then umefaglos means that it's with those applications that they can create pigul. Rashi explains, Shtei matanos shebechatos matiros kolzman shelo nitan shtayim. What it means is, as long as those two applications have not been made, lo hutru emurin lahaktara, so then you can't burn the sacrificial portions. Part of the matir is it allows the emurin to be burned on the mizbeach. Velo habasar lachila, and also again part of the matir is it allows the meat to be eaten. And again, that's not going to happen unless you have the two applications by the carbon chatos, and again, one application by other karbonos, umefaglos, and also those two applications, they create pigul, meaning im nosan shtehen b'machsheves pigul. Let's say both of those applications are done with an intention of pigul, meaning an intention to consume the carbon outside of the proper time, then it creates pigul. Avalachas b'shtika v'achas b'machshava. Let's say you do one in silence with no machsheves pigul, and one with a machsheves pigul. So then lo pigul, then it would not create pigul. Shein mefaglen b'chatzi matir, because what we're saying over here is there is no pigul if it's just half the matir. It has to be pigul throughout the entire matir. And the Gemara continues, the Brisa continues, Beis Hillel Omer and Beis Hillel say, Achas shebechatos v'achas shebechol azvachim. One application by carbon chatos and one application by all other carbonos, because Beis Hillel hold that only one application is required by chatos. Again, it's the one application, materes umefagelas. That's what creates the permitting, and that's what creates the pigul. And the Gemara continues, Maskef la Rav Oshi. Rav Oshi asks on this, Imkain if so, listni agabe kulei Beis Shammai v'chumrei Beis Hillel. We have a list in Edios of the leniencies of Beis Shammai and the stringencies of Beis Hillel, and it comes out that Beis Shammai over here is an additional leniency. It's not listed in Edius, but isn't this a leniency? Because Beis Shammai is saying it only becomes pigul when both matanos, with both matanos having the wrong machshava, whereas Beis Hillel will say, when it comes to a carbon chatas, even with one matana, one application of the blood, you can create pigul. And so why isn't this listed as a leniency of Beis Shammai? And the Gemara continues, Amar le Rava, Rava said to him, Ki Ishel, when the question was asked and brought up, lehetera Ishel, it was talking about the permitters, meaning there's a leniency in Beis Shammai, that's true in terms of pigul, but there also is a stringency in terms of the matir, and it was brought up in the context of the matir, that you need two applications to be matir, to have a little Beis Shammai l'chumra. In that sense, Beis Shammai is being strict. And the Gemara continues at the two dots. Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Shalosh matanos shebechatos, the three applications by carbon chatos, it's referring to the three applications that are not required. We're following Beis Hillel over here. Beis Hillel say that by carbon chatos, just one application is required, the other three are not required. So with regards to those three applications, Einon bos balayla, even though they're not required, but you can't do them at night still. Uvos la'achar misa, now they are able to be done after the death of the owner of the carbon. V'hamala mehen bachutz, and if somebody does those applications outside of the mikdash, so chayiv, then there is going to be a liability. It is considered to be an application in that sense. And Rashi explains, Amar Rabbi Yochanan says, Shalosh matanos acheros shebechatos, again, the other three matanos, the other three applications of the blood by carbon chatos, ein bos balayla, you can't do it at night, v'afa b'shein on ma'akvim, even though they're not required, v'lav zrika gemurahi, it's not really a full-fledged zrika, full-fledged application of the blood, miudam nifsol b'shkiasacham, and nevertheless, that blood, it does become disqualified at sunset, kidel kamon, as we'll say later on, ve'ein malin legabe mizbeach lechatchila, and you can't bring it up to the mizbeach lechatchila. Bos lachar misa, they are bos lachar misa im nasan matan rishona, meaning if the first application was made, v'meisu bala, and then the owners died, kvar kipa b'rishona, you already have an atonement. Ve'in shem chatas gemura al hadam, ve'in shem chatas gemura al hadam. It's not really a full-fledged chatas over the further blood. Al hadam od lifsol misham chatas shemeisu bala. It's no longer going to be considered a problem, a disqualification of a chatas that the owner died, because you already had the kapara. And the Gemara continues, Amar Papa says, Yesh mehen ketchilaso, v'yesh mehen kesofa. When it comes to these three matanos that are not required, in some ways they're considered like the original blood, the blood of the first application, which is required, and in some ways they're considered kesofo, like the remainder of the blood, and they're treated in that fashion. And Rav Papa continues and explains, Chutz v'layla zorus uchlishares keren v'etzba kibus v'shirayim. When it comes to all of those various halachos, we'll see Rashi, but chutz means outside of the mikdash. Laila means at night. Zorus means a non-kohen. Klishares is a requirement to use a klishares. Keren is a requirement of the corner. Etzba is a requirement to use the finger. Kibus is a requirement, let's say the blood gets on the clothing, to wash the clothing. And shirayim means the remainder of the blood with regards to all of those halachos. So ketchilasan is treated like the original application. It's treated like a real application of the blood. And Rav Papa continues, Misa with regards to the death of the owner, Lo Sharia with regards to the fact that it doesn't permit, Velo Mefagla with regards to the fact that it doesn't create pigul, Velo Aila Legavoin with regards to halach of not bringing it into the mikdash, Kesofa, and again those three applications of the blood are considered like the end, like the remainder of the blood. And Rashi explains, Yesh mehen kitchila, so in some ways it's like the original blood. Yesh midvarim shebetoras domim shasholosh matanas kematan rishona. In some ways, those three applications that are not required are just like the first application that is required. V'yesh devarim shein betoras shiyare hadam, and in some ways they're considered like leftover blood. Chutz, with regards to outside, hazorek osan b'chutz, meaning if you throw outside the Beis HaMikdash, outside of the proper place, chayiv, the person would be liable. Sharei ru'uyim lifnim betoras zrika gemura, because really this blood is fit to be inside in the proper way, done in the proper way as a zrika. V'yasser litanan b'layla, and similarly, it's forbidden to do the application at night. The nifsalu milizrok, it's become disqualified from that. V'hazrika, and this is considered a zrika. V'zar chayiv alein misa b'fnim, and also a non-Kohen would be chayiv misa for it inside the mikdash. A non-Kohen should not be doing that avoda. Uteunos klishares, and also klishares is required for this application. Umatana be'etzba, and also you have to do the application with the finger, again by a carbon chatos. That's how the application of the blood is done. V'chibos, and in terms of washing the clothing of the Kohen, im nitos midam hachatos al habeged, if from the blood of the chatos some of the blood gets on the garment of the Kohen, la'achar shenosim b'matana achas, after one application was done, ton kibos, he's still required to wash the clothing. K'dechsiv asher yazami dama, like it says in the pasuk, ki ilu nitas kodem l'chein, it's as if it happened earlier than that. Avolim nosan kol matanoseh, but Rashi notes, if all applications of blood are finished, v'achar kakanitas min hashirayim, and then it's from the leftover blood that it gets on the garment of the Kohen, ein ton kibos, then the kibos is not required. You don't have to wash the garment. Kedaminam b'shmaitin asher yazeh prat lezeh shekvar huzeh. That's what we're going to say in the sugya, is learned out from the pasuk that it says that it was sprinkled with an exclusion to exclude that which was already sprinkled, already applied. And shirayim, in terms of leftover chatos shekibel dama bi'arba kosas, what that means is as follows. Let's say you have a carbon chatos and the blood was received in 4 different cups. V'nasan matana achas mikol echad, and then you do one application from each cup. So kula nasu shirayim, so all of the remainders of the blood in all of the cups, again, even in the ones where the application wasn't required, they all that blood that is left in the cup becomes shirayim. L'shafech liyasod, you have to now pour it to the base of the mizbeach. Af hagimel kosas shirayim shalehen kemo rishonim, even the 3 cups which were not required, their leftovers are treated like the leftovers from the first cup. Kitchila, so again, in all these ways it's treated like the original, kematana rishona, like the original application. And Rashi continues, in other ways it's considered like shirayim, this blood that's used for the non-required applications, and they are as follows: misa in terms of death, boz la'achar misa, meaning you can apply the blood even la'achar misa, kedamar le'el, like we just said earlier. Lo sharia, also these applications don't permit basar shekvar hutter, the meat was already permitted, they're not creating any permitting of the meat. V'lo mefagla, also these applications don't create pigul. And nasan rishona b'shtika, if the first application was done in silence with no wrong machshava, v'hasholosh b'machshava, and then the 3 other ones that were not required were done with the wrong machshava, lo pigul, that doesn't create pigul. The kosher, and it's kosher, it's not b'masnisim, like we learned in the Mishnah. V'lo ayla, and then finally also, lo ayla means that in terms of bringing it into the mikdash, meaning ein lehem toras psol, they do not become disqualified. Knisas pnim, there's a halacha by carbon chatas, you can't bring the blood inside. That disqualification doesn't apply to this blood. Shem nasan matan achas b'chutz, if one application was done on the outer mizbeach as was supposed to be done, v'hechnes hashar laheichel, then you bring the rest of the blood into the Beis HaMikdash, lo nifsol misham chatas shenichnas dama lifnim. That's not going to create disqualification of a chatas that the blood was brought inside. Tichsiv, because in that pasuk, when it says not to bring the blood inside, it's written in that pasuk lechaper bakodesh, that again you're bringing it inside to do kapara, to do an atonement. You're thinking to apply the blood inside, which is not supposed to be done. Beroy lekapara hakosim medaber, but that disqualification is only by blood that is fit for atonement. And here, this blood is not fit for atonement; it's not required for the atonement. Kesofan, so in that sense, it's treated again in with regards to these halachas kesofan, meaning keshirayim, like the end, like the remainders. It's not considered like the blood of zrika. And the Gemara continues, Amar Papa says, Mino Aminallah, from where can I prove to you that this is true? The Tanan, because we learned in the Mishnah, this is a Mishnah later on, Nitas minhat savra al habeged, let's say the blood sprays from the neck of the animal on the garment of the Kohen. So Eino Ton Kibos, that's not the kind of blood that would require that the garment be laundered, be washed. Min hakeren u min hayesod, let's say the blood goes from the corner of the Mizbeach, or from the base of the Mizbeach again onto the garment of the Kohen. Again, Eino Ton Kibos, then Kibos, washing the garment would not be required. And what can we infer from that Mishnah? Hamin haroi lekeren, as long as it's blood that is fit to go on the corner of the Mizbeach, it's fit to be applied, even if it's not required for the application, but it's fit to go on the corner of the Mizbeach, ton kibus. It implies that there is a requirement of kibus in that situation. And Rashi explains, Mino aminallah, from where can I prove to you the tu'una kibus, that this kind of blood would require washing of the garment? Nitas minat savra la beged ein ton kibus. Again, if the water sprays from the neck of the animal on the garment, kibus is not required. Kedamrinan beperak dam chatas asher yiza beroi lahazo. It has to be fit for sprinkling. Yotza zesha lo niskabel bekli. That would exclude this kind of blood going straight from the neck. It has never been received in a vessel. It can't be used for application. Min hakeren, let's say from the corner, mishin noga bekeren hamizbeach nitas ala beged. It touched the corner of the mizbeach and then it got in the garment. O min hayesod, or from the base of the mizbeach, mishanishru shirayim liyesod, from when the remainder of the blood was poured to the yesod. Nitas min hayesod lebeged. It sprayed from the yesod to the beged. Ein ton kibus. That does not require washing. Kedamina, like we said, asher yiza prad lozeh shekvar huza. It says asher yiza, we're excluding that which was already applied. Hamin haroi lekeren, but if it's from that which is fit for the corner, koldu, if it's fit at all to be applied, va'afilu sholosh matanos shebechatos, even those 3 applications in a chatos which are not required, ton kibus, that blood can require that it be washed. But the Gemara continues and asks, Vilataymech, but according to your reasoning, if you are inferring from the Mishnah that min haroi lekeren is ton kibus, you can make the same inference with regard to the yesod. Min hayesod eino ton kibus. If it's the blood from the base of the mizbeach, it does not require that the garment be washed. Hamin haroi liyesod, but if it would be fit to be poured on the base of the mizbeach, essentially the shirayim, ton kibus. So then apparently we can infer from the Mishnah that would require that the garment be washed. But the problem is, but it says that it has to be sprinkled, it has to be applied. Wouldn't that exclude this blood, which is fit for the yesod, because you've already applied the blood, and this is already fit for the yesod? So that would contradict this halacha that we learned from the pasuk of Asher Yizeh. And Rashi explains, Hamin haroi liyesod, but if it's fit for the base of the mizbeach, kagon shiyore hadam, meaning the remainder, the leftover of the blood, haruiyan lishafech liyesod, which is fit to pour to the yesod of the mizbeach, ton kibus. Are you saying that requires washing? Bitmiya, this is being asked as a question. And the Gemara continues and says, if you're going to infer that min haroi liyesod is ton kibus, then hamani Reb Nechemya, are we then saying that who is the author of this Mishnah, Reb Nechemya? And what's Reb Nechemya? The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah. Reb Nechemya says, Shiyore hadam shekrivan bachutz chayev. Reb Nechemya says, if you have the remainder of the blood and you offer it outside of the Beis HaMikdash, so then you're chayev for offering outside of the Beis HaMikdash. So maybe we'll say that that's what this Mishnah is. It's following Reb Nechemya, and that would apply not only to the halacha of outside of the Beis HaMikdash, but it would apply to the halacha of washing the garments as well. And Rashi explains, Hamani Reb Nechemya, this Mishnah would be following Reb Nechemya, Hamilsa hashas kamarla. This is the Gemara talking over here. Umaskara de kushani. It's actually the conclusion of the question. We're going to continue and explain why even if you're suggesting Reb Nechemya, it wouldn't be an answer. It's all part of the question. Le'afukim midrab papa. We're trying to go against Reb Papa over here. Kolomar means to say, Mehalo irya taima didach to Reb Nechemya hi de'afilu b'shirayim nami ton kibus. Maybe you'll say again that the idea is it's Reb Nechemya, that even by the shirayim that kibus is required. Shiyare hadam, again the remainder of the blood, afshel chatos hachitzonos, the remainder of the blood even by the outer chatos, sheikrivan bachutz. Reb Nechemya says if you offer it outside of the mikdash, chayiv, so then you're liable. Al madam kachashivlu. So you see, it's considered to be like dam. It's considered to be like the dam that is applied for zrika. And the Gemara continues and says, Amor deshamat leil Rabbi Nechemya linyan halah. When it comes from Nechemya's shita, he's saying that we've only heard that he says that by halah in terms of offering, meaning in terms of offering it bachutz, that there's a liability. It's considered to be blood in that respect. Midi dehave aivorim upedarim, similar to what we find by the limbs and the fats. But le'inyan kibus mishamatli. But do we hear that he goes so far as to say that blood requires kibus if it gets on the garments? And the Gemara says, in yes, and Rashi explains, midi dehavi aivorim, similar to the limbs, the lav domim ninu, that's not blood, and hamalan b'chutz chayiv, and if one offers them outside the mikdash, he's chayiv, mishum dechazu lifnim, because it's something that's fit to be inside the mikdash. And again, do we see that he goes so far as to apply that to the washing of the garments? And the Gemara said yes, and we will continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Lamed Tes Amud Aleph.